In the dead of night, on a lonely stretch of rural highway, a seemingly innocent encounter takes a dark turn. Tonight's tale takes you on a chilling ride through the heart of terror. When a couple picks up a hitchhiker who seems harmless at first, they quickly discover that appearances can be deceiving. As fear takes hold, reality starts to unravel, and a relentless entity preys on their deepest nightmares. Can they break free from this sinister grip before it consumes them entirely? Brace yourself for a psychological descent into horror. This is a journey through the darkest corners of the mind. Welcome to our latest tale of terror. Let the nightmare begin.
The rain pounded relentlessly against the windshield, the steady rhythm blending with the thunder that rolled across the darkened sky. Laura Miller squinted through the windshield wipers as they fought to clear the heavy sheets of water, and she turned to her husband, Mark, who was driving. "Do you think we should find a place to stop soon?" Laura asked, her voice slightly anxious. Mark nodded, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Yeah, we're pretty isolated out here. There's supposed to be a rest area just up ahead. We can stop there, stretch our legs, and maybe grab a coffee." Laura glanced at the glowing dashboard clock. 11:45 p.m. The road was deserted, save for their car and the occasional flash of distant lightning illuminating the gloomy landscape. She sighed, feeling the fatigue of the long drive creeping up on her. Just as they rounded a bend, Mark's headlights caught a figure standing by the side of the road. A lone hitchhiker, drenched and shivering, waved his arms with a desperate urgency. Mark hesitated, but Laura, always the one to trust her instincts, urged him to pull over. "Come on, it's freezing out there. We should help him," Laura said, her voice filled with concern. Mark pulled the car over, and the hitchhiker hurried to the passenger side. He was a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, with unkempt hair and a scruffy beard. His clothes were soaked through, and he looked both relieved and wary as he climbed into the car. "Thank you so much," the hitchhiker said, his voice hoarse but sincere. "I didn't think anyone would stop in this weather." Mark gave a nod. "No problem. We're heading to the next rest area. It's not too far. You can warm up there." The hitchhiker introduced himself as Ethan Caldwell. As they drove, Ethan seemed eager to make conversation. He spoke of his travels, his interests, and his experiences, weaving in curious comments about the supernatural and ancient rituals. "It's fascinating," Ethan said, his eyes sparkling with a strange intensity. "There's so much we don't understand about the world. Old beliefs, ancient cults. They hold secrets that could change everything." Laura glanced at Mark, who shrugged, his skepticism evident. "You're into that sort of stuff?" Mark asked, trying to mask his discomfort. Ethan smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I suppose you could say that. Some people might call it an obsession, but I think it's more about uncovering hidden truths." Laura tried to keep the conversation light, steering it away from unsettling topics. But Ethan's odd comments lingered in the back of her mind. The storm outside seemed to grow fiercer, the rain now a relentless deluge. As they approached the rest area, Mark spotted the dim lights of the old, dilapidated station. It looked deserted, save for a flickering neon sign that barely illuminated the surroundings. "This place looks like it's seen better days," Mark remarked as he pulled into the parking lot. "Better than nothing," Laura said, trying to reassure herself. She and Mark got out of the car, and Ethan followed, shaking off the rain and adjusting his wet coat. The rest area was a grim sight, an abandoned gas station with peeling paint, a rotting roof, and broken windows. A few scattered vending machines stood forlornly under the overhang, their contents long expired. The air was thick with the musty smell of neglect. Laura shivered as they walked towards the small building, and Ethan seemed to notice. "It's quite atmospheric, isn't it?" he said, his voice carrying an unsettling undertone. Mark tried to lighten the mood. Yeah, it's definitely got that creepy vibe, but let's just grab a coffee and get back on the road. Inside, the building was as run down as the exterior. The flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the old coffee machine sputtered as Mark attempted to make a drink. Ethan wandered around, seemingly fascinated by the decay. "This place has a history," Ethan said suddenly, his tone becoming serious. "You know, many rest areas like this were once sites of strange events. There's an old belief that places like these can be gateways." Laura felt a chill run down her spine. Gateways to what? Ethan's smile was enigmatic. "To other realms, to forces we don't fully understand. You never know what might be lurking." Mark, growing increasingly uncomfortable, tried to change the subject. "Maybe we should just stay here for a bit and then head out. It's late and I'm not looking forward to driving through this storm." Ethan's demeanor shifted subtly, his eyes narrowing as he regarded the couple. "I think it's best if you stay for a while. It's not safe to travel in this weather." Laura and Mark exchanged uneasy glances, but Laura nodded. "Okay, let's just get out of here for a bit." They settled in a small, grimy seating area, and Ethan began to talk more about his interests in occult practices and ancient rituals. His words grew darker and more disturbing, filled with references to sacrifices and dark deities. Laura's discomfort grew, and she noticed Mark's growing agitation. As the night wore on, the rest area seemed to become more oppressive. The wind howled outside, and the rain battered the roof with an almost malevolent intensity. Laura's unease intensified as Ethan's comments grew more alarming. "The ritual has to be performed in the right place," Ethan said cryptically, his eyes flashing with an unsettling light. "A place that's been forgotten by time, a place where the veil between worlds is thin." Mark's patience wore thin. "Okay, that's enough. This is getting weird. We need to get out of here." Ethan's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, I've made plans for tonight. Plans that involve you." Laura's heart raced. "What are you talking about?" Ethan's expression hardened. "I'm part of a cult. We believe in appeasing a deity with sacrifices, and tonight, it's your turn." Panic surged through Laura and Mark as they realized the true horror of their situation. Ethan's demeanor was now menacing, his eyes gleaming with a twisted fervor. "Run!" Mark shouted, grabbing Laura's hand as they bolted for the exit. Ethan's laughter echoed behind them, chilling and sinister. They sprinted through the rain, their only thought to escape the nightmare. The rest area seemed to come alive with malevolent energy as they navigated the dark, desolate surroundings. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and strange figures flitted between the trees. The couple's frantic search for safety led them to the abandoned gas station, where they found a hidden basement door. Desperate, they descended into the dark, damp space. The basement was filled with old, forgotten items and strange symbols painted on the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of mildew and something more unsettling, an ancient, lingering evil. In the dim light of their flashlight, they discovered evidence of Ethan's cult. Ritualistic artifacts, blood-stained items, and chilling writings. Laura's hands trembled as she read one of the texts, realizing the depth of the horror they faced. "Mark, we need to find a way out of here," Laura said, her voice trembling. "We have to stop him before it's too late." They searched frantically for an exit, but the storm outside made it impossible to see. They could hear distant voices, the cult members searching for them. Every noise seemed amplified, every shadow menacing. Finally, they found a small ventilation shaft and managed to pry it open. With effort, they squeezed through and emerged outside, back into the storm. Their clothes were soaked and their bodies cold, but they pressed on, driven by sheer will. As they reached their car, they saw Ethan and several cult members approaching, their faces lit by the eerie glow of the rest area's flickering lights. Mark fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as Laura kept watch. They managed to start the car and speed away, leaving the rest area and its horrors behind. The storm continued to rage, but the couple was determined to escape the nightmare that had unfolded. By the time they reached the nearest town, exhausted and traumatized, the first light of dawn was breaking. They sought help and reported the terrifying ordeal, but when authorities investigated, the rest area and its disturbing secrets had vanished, leaving no trace of the horrors they had witnessed. Laura and Mark's lives were forever changed by the night. They had encountered Ethan Caldwell and his malevolent cult. Though they tried to move on, the memory of that stormy night and the sinister rest area lingered, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide behind a seemingly ordinary encounter. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a ghostly light over the winding highway that cut through the desolate landscape. The trees lining the road seemed to reach out like gnarled fingers, their branches swaying with the cold wind that whispered through the night. Emily Carter glanced at the clock on the dashboard, 11:30 p.m. She turned to her husband, Tom, who was focused on the road ahead. "It's getting late. We should probably stop soon. This stretch of road is starting to feel endless." Tom nodded, his eyes scanning the darkness. "We're almost out of coffee anyway. There should be a rest area up ahead. We can grab a drink and take a short break." As if on cue, the headlights caught the figure of a hitchhiker standing by the side of the road. The man appeared disoriented, drenched from the rain, and in need of assistance. Emily's heart went out to him. "Let's pick him up," Emily said, her voice filled with concern. "He looks like he could use some help." Tom hesitated for a moment, but then pulled over. The hitchhiker approached the car with a mixture of relief and caution. He was a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, with tousled hair and a weary expression. "Thank you for stopping," the hitchhiker said, his voice trembling slightly. "I didn't think anyone would. I've been waiting out here for hours." "Not a problem," Tom replied, opening the door. "We're heading to the next rest area. It's not far." The hitchhiker climbed into the back seat, and Tom resumed driving. Emily turned to him with a friendly smile. "I'm Emily, and this is Tom. What's your name?" "Jack," the hitchhiker replied, his gaze shifting nervously. "Jack Thompson." As they drove, Jack seemed increasingly anxious, his eyes darting around as if he was seeing something that wasn't there. He began recounting his story in a subdued, haunting tone. "I was in a car accident a few miles back," Jack said. "It happened on this very road. I was on my way to visit my family, and then everything went black." Emily exchanged a worried glance with Tom. "I'm sorry to hear that. You must be in shock." Jack shook his head slowly. "It's more than just shock. It's like I'm stuck in a loop. Every night I relive that accident. I'm always trying to get home, but I never make it." Tom's skepticism was evident. "Are you sure you're not just disoriented? It's been a long day." Jack's eyes met Tom's with a haunted look. "You don't understand. I'm not just disoriented. I'm dead. I died that night, and now I'm cursed to wander this road, trying to find a way out." The atmosphere in the car grew tense as Jack's words sank in. Emily tried to reassure Jack, but a chill ran down her spine. The rain pattered against the windows, adding to the growing sense of unease. As they approached the rest area, the fog seemed to thicken, enveloping the area in an eerie shroud. The rest area was dimly lit and looked abandoned, with broken vending machines and a run-down building that exuded a feeling of decay. "This place feels off," Emily said, her voice tinged with anxiety. Let's just grab a coffee and get out of here. Jack's demeanor grew more unsettling as they entered the rest area. He wandered around, his movements erratic, while Emily and Tom tried to make sense of the strange situation. Jack's ghostly appearance became more pronounced under the flickering lights, his skin taking on a pallid, ethereal quality. Tom approached Jack cautiously. "Are you all right? You don't look well." Jack's eyes were filled with a desperate sadness. "You don't understand. I'm trapped here, reliving the same night over and over. I need your help to break the cycle." Emily's heart ached for Jack, but Tom's skepticism was hard to shake. "How can we help you if we don't even understand what's going on?" Jack's voice grew frantic. "You need to listen to me. If you don't help, you'll be stuck here too. Part of the cycle. I've seen it happen. You'll become like me, trapped in this endless torment." The night seemed to stretch on endlessly as the couple struggled to make sense of Jack's cryptic warnings. As they prepared to leave, strange occurrences began to unfold. The lights flickered more intensely and the temperature dropped, filling the air with a bone-chilling cold. Suddenly, Jack's ghostly form began to manifest more clearly. His appearance grew increasingly translucent, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The rest area seemed to come alive with spectral activity, shadows moving on their own and eerie whispers filling the air. Tom and Emily's panic mounted as they realized the full extent of Jack's curse. They needed to find a way to break the cycle before they too became trapped in the nightmarish loop. The rest area had turned into a labyrinth of horrors, with shifting shadows and disembodied voices creating an atmosphere of mounting terror. "Jack, what do we need to do to help you?" Emily pleaded, her voice trembling with fear. Jack's voice was a haunting echo. "You need to understand the nature of my curse. I'm doomed to repeat my death every night, seeking salvation through those who cross my path. You must find a way to release me from this torment." The couple's search for answers led them to an old storage room in the back of the rest area. Inside, they found remnants of Jack's tragic past, faded photographs, personal belongings, and disturbing rituals written in a scrawled blood-red script. As they pieced together the clues, they discovered that Jack's curse was tied to the location itself, a place where his spirit was bound by the traumatic events of his death. To break the cycle, they had to confront the source of his torment and perform a ritual to release him from his spectral prison. The night grew darker and more intense as they prepared for the ritual. The rest area seemed to close in on them, the walls pulsating with an unnatural energy. Jack's presence loomed over them, his spectral form flickering like a candle in the wind. Emily and Tom, their hands trembling, began the ritual as described in the cryptic writings. They arranged the items they had found into a makeshift altar, reciting the ancient incantations from the faded pages. The air grew thick with tension, and the temperature plummeted even further. Jack's ghostly figure hovered nearby, his eyes wide with a mix of desperation and hope. "Please," he whispered, his voice echoing with a sorrowful undertone. "Release me from this endless torment." As Emily and Tom continued the ritual, the rest area seemed to respond. The shadows on the walls twisted and writhed, and the flickering lights grew more erratic. A low, mournful wail filled the air, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the darkness surrounding them. Tom's voice cracked with exhaustion as he recited the final lines of the incantation. "We need to finish this. We have to break the cycle." The air around them grew heavy, and a cold, oppressive force seemed to press in from all sides. Jack's spectral form became more solid, his features contorted with anguish as he relived the moments of his death. The rest area itself seemed to warp and shift, the boundaries between the real and the supernatural blurring. Emily's hands shook as she completed the final step of the ritual. A blinding flash of light erupted from the makeshift altar, and a wave of force swept through the rest area, causing the spectral figures and shadows to dissipate. The oppressive energy lifted, and the temperature began to rise once more. Jack's figure flickered and began to fade. He looked at Emily and Tom with a serene expression, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice growing fainter. "You freed me." With a final, lingering gaze, Jack's spirit dissolved into the light, and the rest area fell silent. The oppressive darkness that had enveloped the place was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of the old vending machines and the distant sound of the rain. Emily and Tom stood in stunned silence, their bodies trembling from the ordeal. They looked around the rest area, now eerily quiet and devoid of the malevolent presence that had haunted them. "We did it," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We broke the curse." Tom nodded, though his expression was one of exhausted relief. "Let's get out of here. We need to get away from this place." They hurried to their car, their movements quick and urgent. The rain had finally eased, leaving the road slick and glistening under the faint glow of the street lights. As they drove away from the rest area, the first light of dawn began to break through the clouds, casting a soft, golden hue over the landscape. The journey home was quiet, the silence between them filled with the weight of their shared experience. They were both haunted by the memory of Jack's tragic fate and the horrors they had faced. As they reached the safety of their home, they found themselves reflecting on the night's events. The rest area was behind them, but the experience had left an indelible mark on their souls. They had faced the supernatural and emerged victorious, but the encounter had changed them forever. In the days that followed, Emily and Tom tried to return to their normal lives, but the memory of Jack and the cursed night lingered in their minds. They knew that they had witnessed something beyond the realm of the ordinary, and that the darkness they had confronted was a reminder of the fragile line between the known and the unknown. They kept their encounter a secret, sharing only what they felt necessary with those close to them. The rest area was soon forgotten by the world, fading into obscurity as if it had never existed. But for Emily and Tom, the memory of that night would remain a haunting reminder of the spectral cycle they had broken and the ghostly journey they had survived. The moon cast a pale, eerie glow over the winding rural highway as Sarah and Mark Mitchell drove through the dense forest. The road stretched endlessly, bordered by towering trees that seemed to close in with each passing mile. A light rain had begun to fall, creating a rhythmic patter on the windshield and adding to the night's oppressive atmosphere. "I don't remember this stretch of road being so long," Sarah said, her voice tinged with fatigue. She glanced at the clock on the dashboard, 11:45 p.m. "Are we sure we're on the right path?" Mark nodded, though his expression was one of mild concern. "We should be. The GPS says there's a turnoff up ahead where we can stop for a break." As they rounded a bend, a figure appeared on the side of the road, illuminated by the car's headlights. It was a hitchhiker, drenched from the rain and looking somewhat disoriented. Sarah's compassionate nature immediately kicked in. "Let's stop," she said, her voice firm. "He looks like he could use some help." Mark hesitated, but then pulled over. The hitchhiker approached the car, his expression a mix of relief and apprehension. He was a man in his late 20s, with a charming smile and an easy demeanor that seemed to put them at ease. "Thank you for stopping," the hitchhiker said, his voice warm and polite. "I didn't think anyone would come by on a night like this." "No problem," Mark replied, opening the door. "We're headed to a rest area not far from here. It's not safe to be out here alone." The hitchhiker climbed into the back seat, and Mark resumed driving. The rain continued to fall, the sound a constant backdrop to their conversation. "I'm Alex," the hitchhiker said, turning toward the couple. I was on my way to visit some friends, but I seem to have gotten a bit lost. It's nice to meet you, Alex, Sarah said, offering a reassuring smile. I'm Sarah, and this is my husband, Mark. As they drove, Alex seemed to take an interest in their personal lives, asking questions about their work and hobbies. His questions were probing, yet non-intrusive, and his charm was undeniable. However, as the conversation progressed, Sarah and Mark began to feel an underlying unease. Alex's questions became increasingly personal, delving into their fears and insecurities. He spoke with a casual familiarity that seemed unnervingly perceptive. Everyone has their fears, he said with a knowing smile. It's what makes us human. What are you most afraid of? Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She glanced at Mark, who was frowning slightly. I guess we all have our own demons, Sarah said, trying to sound nonchalant. Alex's gaze lingered on Sarah, and for a moment, his expression shifted. It was as if a mask had slipped, revealing something darker beneath. It's interesting how fears can shape our reality, he said, his voice taking on a haunting quality. The car's interior grew colder, and the rain seemed to beat harder against the windows. Mark turned up the heater, trying to dispel the growing chill. It's been a long night. Maybe we should just focus on getting to the rest area. As they approached the rest area, the atmosphere in the car had become thick with an unsettling tension. The rest area itself was dimly lit and looked abandoned, with broken vending machines and a dilapidated building that loomed in the darkness. Let's just grab something quick and get back on the road, Mark suggested, his voice tense. Alex's demeanor shifted again, his charming facade replaced by something more sinister. I think it's time for you both to face your fears, he said softly, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. Sarah and Mark exchanged uneasy glances as they stepped out of the car. The rest area seemed to close in around them, the shadows lengthening and twisting in the dim light. Inside, the air was thick with an oppressive sense of dread. As they walked through the rest area, Alex's presence seemed to warp the space around them. The building appeared to shift and change, the walls stretching and contracting like a living entity. The couple's sense of reality began to unravel, and they found themselves lost in a nightmarish labyrinth of shifting corridors and distorted reflections. This isn't right, Sarah said, her voice trembling. We need to get out of here. Alex's laughter echoed through the corridors, a chilling sound that reverberated through the distorted space. You're not going anywhere. You're trapped in a hall of mirrors, where your deepest fears come to life. The couple stumbled through the shifting maze, their fears manifesting in grotesque and horrifying forms. Sarah was confronted by visions of her childhood home, twisted and decayed, while Mark faced nightmarish reflections of his greatest regrets and failures. As the terror escalated, they realized that Alex was feeding on their fear, his shape-shifting abilities creating an ever-changing landscape of psychological torment. They had to find a way to break free from the hallucinatory nightmare and confront Alex's true form. In a desperate bid to escape, Sarah and Mark fought to maintain their grip on reality. They confronted their fears head-on, facing the spectral apparitions and distorted reflections that sought to drive them to madness. The Hall of Mirrors became a battleground of psychological horror, with the couple struggling to distinguish between illusion and reality. Alex's true form began to emerge from the shadows, a monstrous, shapeless entity that seemed to feed on their terror. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its form shifted and twisted in nightmarish ways. Sarah and Mark's confrontation with the entity reached a fever pitch as they faced their deepest fears. They fought to maintain their sense of self and confront the shapeshifter's true nature. The final confrontation was a chaotic and harrowing ordeal, with the couple racing against time to break the psychological grip of the entity. In a moment of clarity, Sarah and Mark realized that the key to breaking the curse was to confront their fears together and reject the illusions that had ensnared them. They recited a mantra of defiance and self-affirmation, focusing on their bond and their shared strength. The Hall of Mirrors shattered, and the oppressive darkness lifted. The rest area returned to its abandoned, mundane state, with the shapeshifter's presence dissipating into the ether. The couple stood amidst the remnants of their nightmarish ordeal, their bodies trembling but their spirits intact. As they left the rest, Aria, the dawn's light, began to break through the clouds, casting a soft, golden glow over the landscape. They drove away from the haunted stretch of highway, the memory of the night's horrors lingering but tempered by their victory over the shapeshifter's terror. In the aftermath, Sarah and Mark tried to rebuild their lives, carrying with them the knowledge of the darkness they had faced. The rest area and the shapeshifter faded into obscurity, but the experience had left an indelible mark on their souls. They knew that the true battle had been one of the mind and spirit, and that their confrontation with the shapeshifter had changed them forever.
As the sun rises and the shadows retreat, the echoes of the night's terror linger. What started as a simple act of kindness turned into a harrowing ordeal, leaving an indelible mark on those who dared to face their deepest fears. If you survived this journey into the unknown, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, not all nightmares end with dawn. Subscribe to Fear Files for more spine-chilling tales and unsettling horrors. Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked.